For those of you who are just popping in and for those of you who are staying after our last session on email security, I'm Tuni Shartner, the Executive Director of District Hall and Venture Café Providence. So welcome to the May MedTech Innovation Forum. Since 2014, our partner Ximedica has conducted this forum as an internal-only monthly information sharing platform to inform and inspire its employees about the newest medical-related technologies in the public domain, with the intent to spur creative ideas and innovative thinking in their work. Through our partnership with Ximedica and NEMIC, New England Medical Innovation Center, we are excited to bring this monthly forum to spur innovative ideas in all of you. We at District Hall Providence, Venture Café Providence, opened in August of 2019 to support startups, innovators, and small businesses by providing them with a free and open lounge workspace on our first and second floor, private meeting rooms and event spaces, and engaging free programming like this that supports entrepreneurship and innovation, including our signature Venture Cafe Thursday gatherings, which we are fortunate enough to have this program a part of now. In, March of 2019, we pivoted to offering virtual content. Now we're back to in-person from 4 to 6 every Thursday. We are remaining virtual through the summer earlier in the day. And we're in person officially 4 to 6 in our District Hall space every Thursday. So please join us if you can. And we're looking forward to September when we go back to, later in the day, 4 to 7 in person with more hybrid programming. So before we get started, I'd like to turn over to our partners. So I'll introduce you, Danielle from NEMIC, and you can take it from here.
Thank you, Tuni. Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Sturman, the Manager of Business Development, Marketing, Communications at NEMIC. We are a MedTech venture studio located in downtown Providence, Rhode Island, and we support MedTech startups from all over the world develop their businesses in the U.S., prepare for fundraising, and then bring their MedTech and digital health ideas forward to successful commercialization. I always like to ask that if you are a MedTech entrepreneur, startup, or innovator, please reach out to us as we have many opportunities to get involved with our programs that will really move you forward in your development. But also, if you are any type of really stakeholder in this industry looking to be an advisor, if you're a service provider, if you're an investor, to also reach out to me, as we do have a growing network and we're building an ecosystem for the MedTech space down here in Southern New England. So thank you very much. And I'll turn it over to Mark Cole of Ximedica.
Thanks, Danielle. Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Cole. I am the VP of Sales and Marketing for Ximedica. We are a medical device design and development firm, and we specialize in designing and developing MedTech diagnostics, drug delivery, and digital and connected solutions for our clients. And as Tuni so rightly said, this is one of the forums that we hold on a regular basis. This is the most regular of them. And one of the reasons for doing this is to help us be very familiar with evolving technologies, gadgets, and innovations that have really, recently come into the public domain, and really helps us to spark innovation, discussion, ideas, collaboration within Ximedica, which are some of the core principles that we run by. I want to thank Jessica for being so flexible. This is a rescheduled version, but this is one that we wanted to make sure that we, in a timely manner, got all the most recent innovations out to you. And thank you for tuning in. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica.
Today's agenda, we cover a bunch of different categories each month. Some flex in and out, some get more, some get less, depending on what's been happening in the last 45 to 60 days in terms of new innovation that's come into the public domain. So these categories are particularly interesting for Ximedica and Ximedica's clients. That's why we focus on them. If there's a particular category that you don't see included here, let us know. We'll try our best to kind of incorporate it in, so long as it's under the MedTech banner. All right, I'm going to jump right into the first category, which is materials. When we 3D print, part of the challenge is trying to reserve the material that we're using, because it's really pretty expensive in terms of those resins. Well, this new form of 3D printing is using different sources for delivering that resin by raising up and down the table surface so that you can create these more more specific supports with less material. So, there's obviously a cost savings around this, as well as a little bit less labor to have to reduce the amount of resin you're having to take off once you've got that 3D resin. Very kind of basic principle, but interesting nonetheless that 3D printers are themselves innovating to address the kind of complaints that customers are providing to them. Staying in the world of 3D printing, I think you may remember from a previous tech forum, we talked about 3D printing metal. Well, now we can 3D print glass. Thank you, Mike Metz, one of our engineers in Minnesota. This comes from the University of Freiburg and Glassamer in Germany. So what they're using is polymer granules that contain silica glass particles, and that can be injection molded with standard equipment. And so after that injection has been molded, the parts can be washed and then baked to remove that polymer. And the temperature of the oven fuses those particles together to create a quartz-like glass. It's a pretty fast, effective production. The only drawback is that after it's removed from the mold, the material has to shrink, but it does shrink in a consistent, equal manner by about 15%. As you can see the difference between this form factor and this form factor here. But interesting, if we need glass in our designs. Thinking also about other forms of 3D printing, wood can now be a bioplastic material that can be printed. You think that we maybe wouldn't need this, but the advantage is that this is using a wood powder that comes as a waste product from lumber mills and a biodegradable solvent to make for an easy to manufacture slurry of polymer and cellulose. And that can be cast as a bioplastic, which has a higher strength, can hold liquid, and also resistant to UV light. When the sheet is buried under soil, it then starts to fracture after about 2 weeks and then degrades entirely after 3 months. So in the context of a better plastic, this could actually be really quite interesting. And it can be actually returned into a slurry form and recast again multiple times. This next material is called an adaptive paper, coming also from a German academic partnership of universities. It's inspired by sea cucumbers, which have the ability to strengthen their exterior when they're in danger or they suspect or fear danger. So this new paper material can transition from firm to soft with an electrical switch. How it works is a fine microfiber cellulose nanofibrils are extracted from tree fiber to create this kind of nano glass-like paper. And when an electric current is applied to it, the links across the material heat up and then break apart, and that causes the materials to soften. And it's reversible if you were to cut the electrical supply, so you can go from soft to hard to soft with a paper format. This next material is called the massless battery. So a battery that actually doesn't have a mass. And you then start to think about what that could mean for airplanes, for cars. Really pretty exciting. So it's an alternative to those heavy, bulky, conventional energy storage options that we have available today. It's using a carbon fiber battery as a power source and a structural component that has the required stiffness that you would need in an airplane or a car. It has a negative carbon fiber electrode and a positive electrode made from lithium ion, phosphate-coated aluminum foil. The two electrodes are separated by this kind of fiberglass fabric that acts as a kind of a matrix that transports the lithium ions between the electrodes. So if the battery was to be integrated into an electric car, for example, that vehicle would obviously weigh a lot less and require less energy to propel it. So we're saving in a couple of different ways there. This material, called the durian organohydrogel from an academic team in Singapore. If you come across a durian fruit, you know, I think it's quite smelly. And so it's considered a kind of luxury or specialty in Asian markets, but the discarded husks actually are treated as trash. Well, this team have figured out how to harvest those husks to create a low-cost, eco-friendly, antibacterial hydrogel bandage. These, so conventional hydrogels are made from synthetic polymers, and they're often using expensive silver or copper ions. And that's obviously a challenge for disposal. Well, this husk cellulose is combined with glycerol and yeast phenols to create this germ-killing gel that has a similar texture to silicone. They've tested it on animal skin, and it's demonstrated pretty good antimicrobial effects for a 48-hour period. So potentially this could end up being incorporated in for wound care in hospitals and for patients. Right, this next material is a tough gel sheath suture coming out of McGill in Canada. This inspired by the structure of human tendons. So sutures are today covered in an alginate polyacrylamide hydrogel that's both slippery and tough, and this reduces the soft tissue damage that's caused by conventional suture. So that's this new innovation. So the gel surface also allows for infection prevention because you can have a drug potentially on that gel surface, embedding microparticles into gel that can potentially fluoresce when exposed to a pH level, for example, infected tissue. And that same fluorescence could be actually improve under infrared imaging to age suture replacement that you've gotten all the sutures out, and in a minimally invasive surgery scenario. This could really change how sutures are used and their value and application. This material is a TBI, so traumatic brain injury brain glue, coming out of University of Georgia. It's designed to replicate the meshwork of sugars that support brain cells, incorporating structures that bind to fibroblasts and neurotroponic or neurotropics proteins. So those are the proteins that boost survival and regrowth after a brain injury. So they've injected this into rats that have been given TBI, and 4 weeks later, they've shown a retention of neurostem cells. So when you're looking at this image, the green surface of the neurons with red blood active vessels, and the active neurons in the healthy blood can be really seen in that injury cavity that was caused by that TBI. And so you can start to see the impact of this brain glue in these poor rats. So they're thinking that they're going to try and further refine this to promote the regeneration of brain cell function in the lesion cavity of an injury. Right, the next material is also a sensor. It's an e-skin sensor. We've seen quite a few kind of things like this over the years. Celeste Greenbaum, one of our researchers, flagged this one for us, comes out of Japan. This has a very flexible sensor that can be applied to a chest using just water spray and can be worn for a week at a time to monitor things like heartbeat or electrical muscle movement. It's made from a polyvinyl alcohol and gold. And there's a wireless transmitter that sends the data to a nearby mobile device, a phone, a tablet. So a clinician could view that data also remotely, as well as the LED screen that's displayed actually on the sensor to convey key vitals, for example, a heartbeat in the form of some basic graphics. Coming out of the team from the University of Tokyo, they're trying to develop a startup called Taka Someo Group. And they're looking to integrate this into clothing for fitness, as well as for potentially pajamas for sleep monitoring, or thinking about caregivers looking after children, for example, or a patient in an ICU bed. This next sensor, I love this baby. He's like, look at me, isn't this great? Isn't this technology cool? This is a cystic fibrosis skin sensor coming out of Chicago's Northwest University, and it measures chloride levels, which is a key biomarker of cystic fibrosis in sweat in real time. So cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease that is really a buildup of thick mucus in the airways, and it causes breathing problems, it causes infection, and it can also impact the digestive system. You want to catch it early, and you particularly want to catch it early in newborns, excuse me, to identify the treatment. But the conventional test is this really, really painful heel prick test. One of our designers, design directors, actually recently went through this for their newborn, and they said it was brutal. Their baby cried, and it was very, very painful for them to even just watch. So the idea of a sensor to get this, collect this data would be much, much better. So this is applied to the skin, and it wicks sweat into the device through these set of microfluidic channels, as you can see on this image here on the right-hand side. A bioassay measures the chloride level and changes based on color. That's very noticeable. A parent can send that photo of the sensor to a clinician for analysis, enabling a more expedited diagnostic process without even having to go into the hospital to get that healed quick. All right, the next sensor device, for those who are worried about Bill Gates getting into microchips in the body, well, UC Berkeley's gotten there first. This is an oxygen level tissue sensor. They've demonstrated it already in live sheep, and it's an implant that measures the oxygenation of tissue inside the body in real time. So UC Berkeley have already kind of explored this area already with a product they call NeuroDust, that tracks nerve signals and muscle activity, as well as a product they also called StimDust. So really imagine super small, that's stimulating nerves to treat chronic pain and epilepsy. So this particular implant, as you can see, is kind of a ladybug size, has an oxygen sensing film, a micro LED, and an optical filter. And all these components work together to measure the oxygen levels. The sensor is controlled via even a built-in circuit. There's even packed that into this really small space, and that generates electrical signal that varies, of course, based on the oxygen sensor. There is also a piezo crystal on this whole contraption that converts those electrical signals into ultrasonic waves that are sent out through the body to an external device. They expect this could help monitor the health of a transplanted organ in terms of its oxygen level, maybe improve cancer treatment, and support premature infant care in the NICU. So they're looking to make this device even smaller so that it could be injectable via a needle, as well as beyond oxygen, track things like pH levels, glucose, or carbon dioxide. We are getting smaller and smaller, folks. Staying in the same vein as implantable sensors, this one has the ability to measure concentrations of biomarkers and drugs in the body, residing in the body for many months without being rejected or losing its functionality. They've tested this on mice, as the image here conveys. They're using receptor-studded gold nanoparticles suspended in a polymeric hydrogel, which changes color when the relevant analyte binds to the nanoparticles. And this hydrogel acts as kind of an artificial tissue to reduce immune rejection, which is why it can stay in the body as long as it can, as long as they're estimating. The blood vessels and the cells invade that hydrogel and then bring the analytes nearer to the gold nanoparticles. The color then changes non-invasively and it's detectable outside the body. And the sensor is primed to detect the presence of an antibiotic, and they on a hairless rat successfully. Our Director of Design Research, Kate, has flagged this one for. This is a brain microgrid recording device by UC San Francisco. So neural activity in the hippocampus, which is our memory hub in our brain, is able to be measured via this high density electrode microgrid recording device. And they've done this in a study with surgical patients who are being treated at the same time as wearing this with severe epilepsy. The device itself contains 32 electrodes on a flexible polymer that conforms to the hippocampus shape. So it's actually applied directly to the brain surface. And they found with this recording device that brain waves in this area of the brain travel back and forth across the hippocampus in a very predictable way and with very predictable patterns, integrating messages from different parts of the brain. And so this is really providing a much deeper understanding of how the brain works, and in particular, how memories are formed. So they've been able to explore the direction of wave travel that could act as a biomarker for understanding better how well a patient is engaged. For example, imagine a student in a lecture hall at the back of the space falling asleep. Well, that student with this recording device obviously is not going to receive as much information and impart that information, but they can actually now start to measure this and understand it. So this is a big leap forward for cognitive brain analysis and science. Staying on the brain, Matt Gill, one of our designers based in New York, flagged this one for us. The Monkey Mind Pong by Neuralink, which is one of Elon Musk's, I don't know what to call it, subsidiaries, I suppose, or enterprises. This is a brain-machine interface, and it was implanted in a 9-year-old monkey's brain. And then that monkey was taught how to play a video game of Pong, first with a joystick, while the device recorded the neuron activity in the brain, learning and predicting the hand movements. And then the monkey was rewarded with a banana smoothie available through a straw. That joystick was then removed, and the monkey was still able to play the game just by using his mind. Elon Musk anticipates the Neuralink device will eventually be able to help paralyzed patients tweet just from their brain, and potentially even help paraplegics be able to walk again. It's the banana smoothie that I think the monkey's more interested in. But taking this a little bit further, Dave Copeland flagged this one from Stanford University. The BrainGate clinical trial in California is taking mental thought and transcribing it directly without it being written. And they've tested this in one paralyzed patient. And the technology is able to enable someone who's paraplegic to communicate with others at a speed that rivals the texting speed of an able-bodied adult. So the technique is using a computer to convert attempted handwriting movements from brain activity and into on-screen text. And this 65-year-old volunteer who had spinal injury 14 years ago had 2 brain implants applied to his cortex, and then was asked to imagine that he was writing normally with a pen and paper. You can see his marks here on the right-hand side on ruled paper. And then those neurosignals were conveyed to a computer with an artificial intelligence algorithm that then decoded those at 18 words per minute with a 94% accuracy, which is by far better than me texting on my smartphone. But really just, thinking about what we're learning about the brain and thinking about how we're applying it to interfaces is really just amazing. How we might be able to communicate actually telepathically for real in the future. All right, staying in the world of user interactions and user interfaces, this optical track display flagged for us by Leonard Silverman, who's a systems engineer in Providence, from Brigham Young. This team is able to draw screenless, free floating objects in physical space, trapping them in a single particle, by trapping a single particle in the air with a laser beam, and then be able to move that particle around, kind of like a hologram, but that actually can be animated. So if you go to this link, you'll see this image here moving between this point and this point in a very real way. But despite how amazing this is even more amazing. Dave Copeland in Minnesota found this one for us. This is 3-dimensional video calls. I know we're all so fed up with Zoom, and we're very eager to all get back together, but this is where this enables a much, much more realistic experience of communicating with someone in a 3-dimensional way that actually feels very, very real. It's using machine learning and a special display booth that renders a video call in 3 dimensions. So it actually feels like you're sitting right across from that individual that may be on the other side of the world. And in an ultra realistic 3D projected model, as if you are literally talking to each other side by side. The booth has a special lighting, a camera, and specific seating positions. And Google is testing this technology in a few of its own offices in the US, but plans to expand the capability and roll it out more broadly. They've got to still figure out some of the hardware components and the processing requirements. Obviously, you can imagine there's a lot of data that's involved in this being able to happen, but it's in pilot nonetheless. Maybe more grounded or more prosaic as a sensor device and a UI interaction, a smart ring called Wave for Work coming out of Iceland. It's worn on the index finger, and it basically works like a pointer or a clicker as you're presenting. It has ability to control various different applications like Zoom, Skype, PowerPoint, Microsoft Teams, and Keynote. You can use it to mute a microphone, manage a video camera, run or start slideshows whilst the wearer moves around the room. It can be also used to control music, playing, pausing, and adjusting volume. It's both compatible with Mac and Windows, and it can even recognize hand or gestures, and you can assign a particular function to the ring so that it's customized to you. There are 3 actual physical buttons on the device, as you can see the prototype on the right-hand side, and it's rechargeable for 8 hours, and each function is displayed on they even have a small screen on this thing on the top of the ring. It's commercially available if you wanted to have a go. Let us know how it is for $99. All right, this material is also informing user interaction and potentially could be a disability device as well. This is a haptic touchscreen coming out of South Korea. It's flexible, which not many touchscreens are today, but it can vibrate in specific areas to provide very precise or more precise haptic feedback. The film itself is laid over a grid of low power near infrared LEDs. And the film has a polymer that absorbs light and converts it to thermal energy. And that also enables it to expand and bend with heat, which is where the vibration comes in. So when those LED lights blink on and off in specific areas, the film over the top of it bends and flattens as it warms and cools based on that LED light. And that could then now start to lead to some Braille touchscreen interfaces that are very region specific, or touchscreens that even can start to give us different textures. Quite how I might use that, I don't yet know, but the idea of this is really quite compelling, particularly for those who have visual impairment and need Braille to read. But the team is next exploring how to reduce the energy requirements to this and boost its efficacy. All right, robotics, the RF grasp coming out of MIT. This is an articulating grasping arm, which is not really anything big, but it has an optical camera at its wrist, which allows it to identify objects based on their appearance that are not actually visible, like, for example, behind a wall or under a pile of other objects. And it's using radio frequency transceivers to emit radio signals that are then reflected back from those objects that have barriers in the way of them. So now this robot can start to find things that it can't actually originally see. And those reflected radio signals convey information back on the object location. The robot receives that information, is able to move aside clutter or maybe cut through skin to get to the relevant location and grasp the object in question. All right, moving into diagnostics and imaging. This is a hybrid gamma camera coming out of Loughborough University in the UK. It provides 3D images of cancerous growths under the skin. The tech uses gamma and optimal imaging to detect and measure the depth of radioactive material. The patient's injected with a low level of radioactive tracer, like a contrast, as an example, and that's taken up by the cancer cells to reveal the location of its growth. And so by combining gamma ray imaging with stereoscopic optical imaging at slightly different angles, you can actually triangulate where that growth is for better understanding and diagnosis and potentially a decision to treat. Staying also in imaging, the near-infrared hyperspectral imaging technology coming out of Tokyo. This is allowing for the assessment of liver fat content without the need for a biopsy. What it's doing is it's highlighting fat distribution to help diagnose conditions like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which can lead to liver failure and also is associated with cancers. The conventional option is an invasive biopsy, which, if you can avoid it, you would love to. This new method is able to visualize disposition throughout the liver and quantitatively map the density gradients through the liver organ and therefore assess the health of the liver and the fat content specifically that may need to be addressed. Another diagnostic is expanding what a cochlear implant can be. This particular team from Belgium are using cochlear implants to detect, so cochlear implants detect noises via the external head-mounted microphone, as you can see on the image on the left-hand side, and then stimulates the auditory nerve so that the brain's hearing can register those sounds. So during initial calibration and adjustment, the patient's able to guide the communication, guide the clinician by communicating how well the implant works. But the problem is that children, particularly young children, aren't really able to communicate whether the implant is working well. And so this team are exploring how to develop a cochlear implant that doesn't have to rely on the patient communicating back, and that calibration can happen on its own in a more automated way. So the implant electrodes are now recording brain waves that arise in response to sound as part of that calibration. Staying in the ear for a minute or two, the hummingbird tympanostomy tube system by Preceptus Medical is addressing something called tympanostomy tubes or ear tube issues. And this is a pretty common procedure. It's performed on 1 million US children each year. And conventionally, it's done under general anesthesia. And it's designed, the whole premise of this clinical procedure is to address the excess fluid in the middle ear that can lead to a lot of chronic ear infections, which is not fun to have as a parent of a young child. So this product is a 5-minute procedural solution that only requires local anesthesia with an ENT placing the device. And so the whole setup is a lot less traumatic. It's a lot less scary, particularly for those young kids. So this device creates an incision using a cutting sheath at the device tip and places a tube by scrolling back on a slider. So when we think about kind of some of the handheld devices that at least at Ximedica we're working on, thinking about the ergonomic form of this and some of the features that are incorporated, there's potentially some inspiration there for us. Moving into therapy devices, for those who are focused on NICU childcare, this might be interesting to you. The Karma baby bed from UBC in Canada was actually born from a nurse's insights looking at who worked in the NICU. So the brain of a premature infant obviously is still in development and needs all the oxygen it can to grow. But when a baby gets stressed, for whatever reason, they breathe more shallowly, and this creates, this decreases, of course, the amount of air they intake and therefore the amount of air they have in their bloodstream and also their brain. So this device is designed to rise and fall in simulation of respiration and heartbeats and has a heartbeat like a parent holding a baby, which isn't always possible in a NICU setting for the parent to be there. So in a small clinical trial that they've done with this device, monitoring the brain oxygen of babies on the device compared to a control group of caregivers, while holding the baby, as a painful routine blood sample was drawn, which you'd think would cause a lot of screaming and psychological stress for the baby. And they found that this had a remarkable impact on how the baby responded to the amount of oxygen that they were able to intake in that moment. So they're expanding their work to explore more real-world conditions, and particularly thinking about low to middle income countries where the ability to care for lots of NICU children all at once may be more limited based on staff availability. Right, moving into drug delivery, Alex Baker, another one of our system engineers, flagged this one for us. The Unity Diabetes Health Management System is now online, live and commercial, FDA approved. This is a startup, Bigfoot Biomedical, which is unusual in the diabetic space, given how much effort it takes to bring a product to market in this particular category. This is a connected insulin pen cap that tracks both, has ability to both track long-term and short-term insulin doses. It's got a rechargeable battery in the cap that lasts for several weeks, and it can not only scan a glucose monitor like the Abbott Freestyle, it's actually designed to work with the Abbott Freestyle, but it can also recommend insulin doses actually on the pen cap, as well as an accompanying app, and alert users to high and low glucose levels. So the system is really particularly designed for individuals who are on multiple insulin injection therapy each day, and provide them with decision support as well as automation. For those people who actually aren't on an insulin pump but are actually manually giving themselves insulin injections. This could be very helpful for those folks for obvious reasons. So the system actually uploads data to a cloud when Wi-Fi or cell signal is present, so reducing the burden of those manual logs that diabetics have to keep and then show their doctor that they're on track and being compliant. The users can opt to receive actually also a monthly prescription mail order package that bundles all the needed diabetic supplies with a subscription price or insurance copay. We actually explored the idea of bundling and helping support diabetics way back like 10, 12 years ago. So it's really exciting to see some of the innovations coming in this category. Staying in drug delivery, but maybe not through lunch. If you're eating at this moment, MIT has decided to develop artificial mucus. The real stuff is not good enough. Mucus exists to protect, obviously, sensitive tissue membranes from germs and keep the tissue moist. So is that a good thing, even though we don't necessarily like snot in our noses? So the body produces more than 1 liter of mucus daily. I would imagine it's more if you suffer from allergies at this time of year. And that mucus has the potential to cover surface areas of more than 400 square foot. It was thinly laid out over a flat surface. But mucus proteins also interfere with bacterial function and hinder cell communication, and they cling to their host cells and basically reject them from the body. So mucus is a good thing. The mucins that are being explored by MIT are shaped like long, tiny bottle brushes, and they have a backbone of amino acids and glycine sugar molecule spikes. So this team have generated this synthetic mucus that has the same antibacterial materials, but they're using carbon-carbon double bond cis polymer configurations, which is shown by this combination of chemistry drawings here. So in lab tests, this is a water-soluble synthetic mucus, was able to capture and neutralize bacteria toxins that cause cholera. So imagine you've got someone who has a particular disease or has been able to contract. You can now start to protect other people who maybe have a limited ability to generate their own mucus. Also use it to test, I suppose, ways to address different bacteria as well. So this next drug delivery product is a patch that has the ability to help the body regenerate blood vessels. Pretty mind-blowing. This comes from South Korea, and it's able to mimic the natural process of this body capability of angiogenesis. This technology is able to provide a regenerative efficacy to restore blood flow in patients with particularly cardiac disease like ischemia and myocardial infarction. The patch is made with microparticles that hold a muscle adhesive protein, hyaluronic acid, and platelet-derived growth factor. And those particles are suspended in a hydrogel, and the hydrogel has been tested on lab rats and shown to stimulate the growth of actually working vasculature and improve ischemic tissue. So potentially when we start to have heart issues, this might be a way to slap a patch on it and keep calm and carry on. This next drug delivery is in the field of cancer, particularly brain cancer. It's a very difficult cancer to treat, for obvious reasons. It involves significant surgery to remove tumor from very sensitive tissue, and oftentimes malignant cells have not all been removed and they linger, and that leads to reoccurrence. And in order to properly treat brain cancer today, it really involves some really nasty, very, very strong chemotherapy drugs that have some really challenging side effects. Part of the problem with the brain is it has this very, very sophisticated semi-permeable brain barrier that acts as this way to kind of limit substances that shouldn't actually be entering the brain. And that makes for some of the chemotherapy drugs that are available today are difficult to get to where they need to go. So this implantable ion pump It's just 200 nanometers in diameter, and it's made from a biologically compatible materials that can regulate the transport of ions in and out of cells. So we're thinking very, very small in terms of a nanotechnology. The ion pump positively charges a chemotherapy agent, one specifically called gemcitabine. And what this particular agent does is work at a cellular level to disrupt tumors. And it's all held in this electrolyte reservoir. The pump pushes the agent through an ion transport channel directly into the tumor cells so they can do their work to address those remnant malignant cells that have been left over after surgery. All right, moving into COVID, there's just a couple this month round, which suggests that we're coming out of the backwaters that we've had in the last year. But this variant nucleoside guard or vanguard coming out of Singapore is a CRISPR-based COVID test. It takes 30 minutes to get the results. And it can read a variant of genetic sequences of the virus. So as we hear and worry about mutants or variations of the virus, this is already thinking about and planning for it. So the steps of the product include dipping a paper strip into a test tube mixture that contains a nasal sample. The test has been designed to be really affordable for those particularly poor resource communities that don't have access to the more expensive, $25, $30 COVID tests. And it doesn't require an RNA purification like a standard PCR test does today. So this CRISPR system is able to recognize and cut out the specific segments of the virus genetic material. And those snipped fragments then can glow and be detected by a microplate reader, to be able to see the fluorescence. And if one band appears, the test is negative. Two bands, like many of the other litmus results that we see today, 2 bands represents positive. Also saying in COVID and sensors and diagnostic materials, this one is really going to the place where you should expect to see this technology 3 to 5 years out. This is a COVID electronic sensor that can be put in your smartphone, as simple as that. And it's able to detect minute levels of a specific virus and or bacteria in the air, on the surface of your breath, or on any surface. It could be used to detect for COVID, for flu, or whatever the next pandemic is that's coming. The project's been funded by Robotics, which is an NIH institution, and it's planning to develop this exposure sensor over a 2-year period. So expect to have to upgrade your phone in 3 years' time to be able to have this technology, but pretty cool. I would definitely want it. Okay, in the other category, we've got about 15 minutes left here. There's a couple of robotics. This first one is the DrabBot, obviously inspired by a dragonfly because it looks very similar to it. Dragonflies, when you are watching them at a pond or a lake, they can skim across the water. And this one has the ability to do the same thing. It's 5.7 centimeters long, so very small. It's also soft. It's designed to check for oil spills or high water acidity for those polluted water areas. It's made without any electronics, and it works through a network of flexible silicone tubing microchannels that pump air through the wings. And as the air escapes through the holes in the rear, the robot can move forward. There are inflatable actuators that lower the wings and block the airflow, and so the robot can become stationary. There's a self-healing hydrogel on this DrabBot that responds to changes in acidity, and it's coated on 2 of the wings of the device. So when it comes to a high acidity water surface, the front and the back wings with the hydrogel fuse together, which causes the DrabBot to spin in circles. A sponge can be incorporated into the wings that changes color when it's exposed to oil. So you could send a series or swarm of these DrabBots out and come back with an analysis of the water surface that you're querying. This next robotic is called the Scout. It is a home surveillance robot that has 4 mechanium wheels that can allow the unit to move from side to side while facing forwards, kind of like a crab. The robot is set up. The setup involves the homeowner manually steering the Scout through a patrol route of the home using an app, and the software records the route and guides the robot through scheduled patrols. It's connected to your home's Wi-Fi and equipped with night vision. So you can actually view real-time video remotely if you happen to be away from home on vacation. The robot has a motion detector, it has a microphone, and a two-way audio communication and video recording. So it can check out those more unusual movements or noises, as well as recognize humans and pets. The battery has a 2.5 running time of hours, and it can return to base when it's to recharge. So think about the vacuum robots that we potentially all have in our homes now, and taking this to a whole new level with our Nest video cameras on our front doors. $199. They're looking for participants through a Kickstarter funding campaign to try out the product when it's first launched. This next diagnostic is a way to help farmers understand the health of their plants, crops that they've grown. So this company has actually genetically engineered crop plants to produce fluorescent proteins when they're in stress, for example, not enough water or too much heat. The proteins are not visible to the naked eye, but they can be imaged on special cameras, either drone or satellite. So the plants actually fluoresce in 3 different colors to indicate lack of water, presence of pathogens, or nutrient deficiency. And that data can be accessed through a computer, through a web portal. So they've tested this, they are already testing this on engineered tomato plants and soybean plants in California. And the seeds are actually interesting, not any more expensive than regular crops, and have the same growth rate, same hardiness and yields. They don't say whether they taste the same though. That's what I'm curious about. All right, for those who are gerbophobes, you may be interested in this product. It's a smarter vacuum that's able to visualize for you how much dust you have on various different surfaces, and a built-in sensor tallies the particles that it's collecting to show you how much work it is actually doing. There is a laser built into the device that sits 0.28 inches off the ground and at an angle of 1.5 degrees, and there is a physio sensor that monitors the vibrations of particles that are sucked into the cleaner head at 15,000 times a second. So super accurate, you'd think. Those vibrations are converted into electrical signals, and that tallies the dust size and display on the LCD screen. Suction levels then can adjust depending on the amount of dust or the size of the dust in its path. It is just as expensive as everything else that Dyson sells at $700, but commercially available if you would like it. All right, there always has to be something in space now. I feel like that's a new requirement because there's so much space exploration happening. The Daedalus, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing that right, from Europe, from Holland in particular, is a spherical robot, a spelunking robot, not for caves in the human world or the world that we're on, but caves on the moon. The acronym stands for Descent and Exploration of Deep Autonomy of Lunar Underground Structures. Rolls off the tongue. And it can identify geological samples and raw materials like water ice, which is what we're trying to find on other planets and other areas other than Earth, because maybe we want to move there. This robot can be lowered into a cave pit via a detachable tether. And then once it's on a surface, it can disconnect and roll away and find things and analyze things. It can clear obstacles. And the tether also acts as a Wi-Fi receiver to maintain communication as the robot maps a cave in 3D, measures temperature and radiation, and then eventually the robot comes back. The spelunking robot comes back to the tether, reconnects and can be pulled right back up. Okay, Mike Metz, you get the prize for the weird one today. Hopefully we're all back in the office before we actually need to run out and buy this one. This is a realistic motorized eyeball that includes a web-enabled video camera just to freak you out even further of people watching you. And it can be positioned on the top of your computer monitor. It's an open source design, so you can make it on your own at home. It's intended to spark dialogue about the ubiquity of sensors in our lives. The camera, as you can see on the GIF, blinks, looks around, and you can even waggle its brow while you're on your Zoom or team call to give you some empathy that the person who's talking maybe not talking truth or whatever. So the device is actuated by 6 servos and works with a Raspberry Pi camera and a circuit board. Isn't that wonderful? Creepy as all bottom. All right, that's it for today. We have we keep our archive on Ximedica SharePoint. I'm more than happy to share insights from it, and we mine it quite often for various different projects. Our next innovation forum will be the second Thursday. It's always the second Thursday of each month, except when I'm stuck on the plane. Our next one will be on June 10th. And please send me submissions. I'd love to incorporate, as you can see from many of the people who contributed. If there's something that you feel like everyone else should see, please share.